Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Coach Brad Wilson. And today's return guest on CPG is the author of A Girl's Guide to Poker, the always brilliant and engaging Amanda Botfeld. Despite her book tour being on ice because of a global pandemic, Amanda hasn't been sitting around resting on her laurels. Not only has she been studying and growing as a poker player, she's also been creating and teaching a college-level poker course for the next generation of card players. In the following conversation, you're going to hear me get fired up at some despicable internet trolls who are so miserable and have so little going on in their lives that they feel the need to tear someone down who's doing everything in her power to grow and popularize this game. The reason why that touched a nerve with me is because if the next poker boom is meant to come from a large influx of women entering the poker world, it will be exactly because of folks like Amanda Botfeld and in spite of the slimy trolls who exist only to ooze out of their sewers and spread their awfulness. And if you're as passionate about growing this beautiful game as much as Amanda and I, and you want to see it thriving for many, many years to come, highly consider either scooping up a copy of Amanda's book or directing a human being you love in your life to pokerpower.com. That's poker, POWHER.com. And in today's episode with Amanda Botfeld, you're going to learn Amanda's path to teaching a college poker course, how poker has touched almost every aspect of Amanda's life, and much, much more. Now, without any further ado, I bring to you a poker pro, author, and teacher, the thoughtful and articulate grower of poker, Amanda Botfeld. Amanda, welcome back to Chasing Poker Greatness. How you doing?
Good. I am glad to be back. Thank you so much for the second invitation.
Yeah, and hopefully there will be more invitations down the line as well. We were just talking in the pre-interview conversation about I was talking about how I've lost all sense of space and time. I'm not exactly sure when, your first episode came out. It could have been anywhere from 3 months to a year ago. That's like the time frame that I'm confident, but I don't know where it exists in that time frame.
The range, right?
Yeah, it's a range, right? We got to play the range. What's been happening in the time since you came on the first episode and then today? Let's catch the listener up on your life since then.
Sure. Well, I am engaged. I'm getting married next week. So poker love story. We met at a poker table 3 years ago. So that's exciting. And then I've been deepening my involvement with Poker Power, which we can talk more about at length.
Sure. For sure.
Which is an organization that we teach women how to play poker, with the idea being that the skills that we learn in poker are applicable to women in business. And then I guess the final thing, which I'm very excited about, is Santa Monica College. It's a community college in Los Angeles. I am now teaching a poker class there online. So that has been great. It's a 6-week class. I taught it just ended about 2 weeks ago. And then we're going to do the same thing again in September. So another 6 weeks poker strategy at Santa Monica College.
Botfeld, how'd you get that gig? That sounds like a really fun gig.
And it is a really fun gig, right? I knew someone else who was teaching a different course at Santa Monica College. And I asked him the same question. I said, how'd you get that? And, I obviously have been teaching with Poker Power for over a year. I have my book, A Girl's Guide to Poker. I do a lot of teaching beginners how to play poker, even though the class is beginner to intermediate. And I was able to get the gig. They said, all right, you can teach it.
Yeah, like you're good. This is, if I remember correctly, whenever you wrote A Girl's Guide to Poker, you just like reached out to D&B and they're like, okay, write a book. Okay, teach this class.
Good memory, good memory. Well, yes. On the one hand, it was very nice. The other hand, it's, you know how like you fire up a million tournaments and you just never know which one is going to hit. And then the one that hits, it just feels like a sun run and it's easy, but all the others don't. That's kind of how my life is, especially with like writing projects and like landing gigs and stuff like that. It's like you email a million places and it just feels like none of it's, responding. And then the one that does, they're like, okay, great, teach a class or great, write a book. It's just like, then you win the tournament. So I feel like it's the same concept. Because I think we spoke about, I used to be a writer in politics.
Sure. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, when I was 23, I believe, when I was 23, so the 22 or 23, I got an article published in the Wall Street Journal. And a lot of people asked me a similar question. They're like, how'd you get that? Right? Who'd you know? I didn't know anybody. What would happen is literally like every Friday night, I would, my senior year of college, I'd make an Irish coffee and I would like write my brilliant thoughts about, what's going on in the world. And I would literally just shoot it off to op-ed at New York Times, op-ed at Wall Street Journal, op-ed at LA Times. And I would do this every week and it would never work. And then a year later, I just get an email back from one of the editors of Wall Street Journal, great, we're running your article in 2 days. And it's kind of like that. It's like you fire up a million tournaments and then you bink one. And so
one of them binks.
And one of them binks. So that's kind of how I do my life.
I think that's how most people do their life, honestly. I think a lot of times success from the outside looks like an overnight venture or something that just kind of like sprung up from nothing, when the reality is like, even when I started this podcast, right? Because I've been a poker player for now pretty much my entire adult life. I knew that the path from like the couch to final table is full of pitfalls and failures and existential crises and just all these things. And that was sort of like the point of Chasing Poker Greatness, was like, let's dive deep into these failures so that we can see like where this success came from. Because as somebody that's been in this space, I know that I don't have any friend, I've never had any contact in the poker world that hasn't had just a full-on emotional breakdown caused by this game of poker. So like the pain is very, very real, but from the outside, you're like, oh, well, Fedor just like woke up one day and was the best poker player in the world, and that's just not how shit goes down.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. You have to do your homework.
Tell me, in that vein, had you pursued any projects in poker that didn't come to fruition before you inquired about the teaching gig?
Let me think about that question. Any projects in poker that I pursued that did not come to fruition? The book was pretty instant. I got to say, I emailed right when I got that done.
Yeah. Poker world might be much more accepting than the journalistic world.
Yeah. A big I've only been playing poker for about 3 years, right? And where I kind of cut my teeth was playing all the daily tournaments, right? And those don't get recorded online. And it was like, I won my very first poker tournament I ever entered with the dailies. Then they had a leaderboard at the MGM casino in Maryland where I was playing. And I got in the top 10 on the leaderboard, and all these different things happened, and they're all with the dailies. So nothing's recorded, right? And I have basically $2,000 in my hand in mob, and then COVID happened. And then I wasn't really able to play anything. And so I think probably my biggest obstacle in advancing in poker is it's almost like I don't have a resume. Other than I've done a lot, and I used to teach second grade, Sunday school and stuff. So I've taught a lot of classes, I can credibly speak to being a teacher and teaching beginners. And I can credibly, kind of do the whole beginners game, but anything else, I've literally been destroyed in online forums and torn apart and in tears. Like when I first posted my Santa Monica College class, people were making fun of me about it.
Why?
And they screenshotted my Hendon Mob.
That's it?
Yeah. And they,
Wow.
and I got eviscerated to the point where I stopped promoting it. Because on those, platforms on Facebook. And even the same thing happened in all women's poker groups. So it's not a direct answer, like something that didn't go through, but it's just been really, really tough with, everything I did was daily tournaments and cash games.
How'd you feel getting that blowback just because you didn't have a Hendon Mob?
Oh, in tears. And very frustrated. I'm living in Mexico right now. We're in Cabo San Lucas, my fiance. I'm not, I played 2 or 3 tournaments. Well, I played 2 tournaments and I rebought one once, right? For like a poker power trip in July, and I cashed in one of them at the Venetian, and I was so happy that I got some even result, and all right. But other than that, I just haven't really had opportunities, and it's very, very frustrating for me. And it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like I am going through my life missing a degree.
Yeah. So first of all, to address the criticism that you received, if anybody listening to Chasing Poker Greatness right now is one of those people, just shut off the fucking show and don't listen again.
Not the podcast. I am not going to be able to satisfy your.
No. I don't listen to any of my shows ever again. Period. Don't listen to future ones or past ones. Just don't, because that's just unacceptable. I demand better from my audience to just treat people with more respect than that. That's just fucking bullshit. And also too, you can look up my Hendon Mob. Look up my Hendon Mob. There's nothing there. Let's fucking throw down and play some cards, because the reality is Hendon Mob is not the fucking end all be all as it relates to poker skill levels and poker talent. So anybody out there that does stuff like that, stop tearing people down. It doesn't make you bigger. Focus on yourself and look at yourself in the mirror, and let's just go from there. Right. So I just had to get that out there on the podcast, because this is something that just instantly fires me up.
Well, I'm going to think about this at night, and it makes me feel better than I can express. So thank you. Yeah. But I did, circumvent. The reason why I was able to kind of get the gigs that I did was because I had a pretty seasoned background as a writer. And that's how I pitched my book. I was like, I'm a very good writer. So, and a lot of poker books are not written by writers, right? They're written by poker players.
Sure. Yeah. Very, very true. We can tell. You can tell by reading them that they're written by poker players.
You can tell, yeah.
So actually, let's kind of go back to you teaching the course, or actually we can go back to Poker Power and talk about how you got involved with that group and then how that experience has been.
Oh, it's been wonderful. It's been absolutely fantastic. They reached out to me in a Facebook group. They were, looking for women who could, teach and talk about poker. And I was interested in getting involved with them. And I started teaching classes and absolutely loved it. And, one of my favorite examples that I think I heard before I went on your last podcast, after I went on your last podcast, was we had these 2 women, they were sisters in our classes, and very smart women. They went to business school. They have a company, right? They're actually twins. They have a twin store and a marketing agency, and they're cute, right? And they said, why Poker Power? And they said, you know what? We went to a women's conference and we hated it. And we were just completely left with all the obstacles that face women, all the issues that face women. And it just made us feel extremely depressed. And then we went to Poker Power, and it was wow, now there's something I can do about it. It's actionable advice. Okay, you're having problems with your confidence. Raise your hands, don't limp. Don't just not commit things and not commit chips unless you know how it's going to work out. Right. Start bluffing, try to make moves, try to be rewarded for smart decision-making immediately. regardless of all the other factors of
Yeah.
society.
Stop playing so passively. Let's be more aggressive.
Yeah, let's get our heads in the game. And it was like all of a sudden, there's a way we can exercise agency and do something and be and feel big in the world.
Yeah. And so your experience with them throughout the past year, rewarding one, how's it been?
Oh, it's been rewarding. It's been energizing. It's been a great space. And now we're expanding to teaching at some universities or MBA programs as well through Poker Power, like the Northwestern Kellogg Business School. That's been fantastic. I believe that class was waiting listed. It was so popular.
There we go.
Yeah, so very, very exciting, very rewarding. It's funny though, because, sometimes I teach women who are twice my age and 3 times more accomplished than me, like in the real world, right? And like life, like I'll like teach like banker type, like women who like run companies and who are like big names. And I'm like, don't get tilted, right? Right. Like it just feels, because they don't know how to play poker. They don't know that Queen 8 of diamonds is not an amazing hand, right? And and so they don't have any poker expertise, but their knowledge elsewhere in life. And even when we teach these MBA business school programs, you're just dealing with such incredibly smart, competent women. And
it's really funny that you say that exact example of Queen 8 of diamonds, because so it's not so different out there for like me as a cash game player who's traveled around and played in, big games against very successful people. One guy that I had a friendship with, Max, he is a billionaire, owned just giant clothing brand and just like 4 jets. The brand owned like 4 jets. And I mean, just like lived in a $70 million house in Beverly Hills and just like,
wow, nice.
He's done some shit in the world, right? Like he's had some success. But in the poker space, not so much. He's like a legendary whale. And I remember one time, like he was asking me, trying to learn poker from me, which is like, again, kind of funny because, I'm this like 27-year-old person who has only played poker and has had no success in any other area in life really at that point. Yeah. And he looked down at Queen 8 of spades. And I remember being like, yeah, just fold that, Max. And he's like, what? What do you mean? This is a great hand. I can't fold this. I have to play. But anyway, I digress. But it was just funny that
I relate to that completely.
The same exact hand and same exact situation I encountered, which is just funny.
It's real, right? Yes. They're like shocked and they don't really believe you. Like they'll do it to like humor you, right? But
Max wouldn't even do it to humor me.
Yeah, not that much. Yeah. But with what I've learned from Poker Power, I'm a little bit more serious note in terms of our mission. Right now, we're really honing in and we've defined, we're still a startup, but we've really recognized that our best audience is corporate women. But before, we were just kind of testing with women of all different demographics, right? And I was teaching a lot of high school clubs. And the difference between the high school clubs and the adult women clubs was night and day. And what happened is, at first, I felt like I was teaching these degenerate gamblers, okay? Because the high schoolers, they were these 15-year-olds, they were not getting it. They were all in, every hand, bluffing, every street, just going cuckoo bananas, right? With their friends. And then I had an epiphany. I was like, wait, 15-year-old boys are not playing perfect poker, right? Like they're doing the same thing. They're just trying to come out there, and make moves and, kind of being over aggressive, right? And then when flash forward, to when you're teaching 50-year-old women and the default becomes the opposite. It becomes, let's not make mistakes. Let's not put chips in the middle. I'm going to limp the ace jack, stuff like that. And so really what we're trying to do is we're trying to catch women before that happens, right? Especially with these like MBA programs, because something happens between 15 and 50, and you could call that life, where all of a sudden, we get shell shocked. And and all of a sudden the default switches from making moves and being over aggressive to being under aggressive. And that's what we're here for.
It's a great metaphor for life, really. I think that
Yes.
the young kids are less risk averse because they've got less to lose. And as you progress in your career, you have more to lose. And so that makes you be more risk averse. And so you exercise caution instead of, the aggression of like a 20 or 21-year-old, because like a 20 or 21-year-old, like what's the worst that happens to them, right? They just get like rejected a billion times. I mean, it's not like life or death here, right? But like you're 55 or 60 and like you have a family and you have responsibilities, people depend on you. You've got a lot more to lose.
Well, that reminds me, it's funny with having a family, because I listened to an old, not super old, like a few years old interview with Daniel Negreanu. And he was asked who should be like the next face of poker? Like who, what would be your ideal person to win the World Series of Poker, main event, blah, blah, blah. What would really catapult poker? And one thing he was saying was, he said what he liked about Joe Hashem when he won the main event is that he was already an established person with like, who knew who he was, who had a family, who could be a face, versus then you have some of these younger guys that win and they're just not as defined yet, right? You don't really have the same level of like life and personality development. So it makes it harder to go on a talk show.
Yeah. And two, like they're also less mature. And so they don't really understand. I mean, they just don't understand like the downstream responsibilities or the even possibilities and opportunities that you can get from, accomplishing such a major thing like winning the WSOP main event.
Yeah. Well, my favorite hand, this is kind of, this is a poker hand, but I know your audience can handle talking about the hands, right? Yeah.
I think so. I think they got it.
Okay. Yeah.
The ones who are still listening after my tirade earlier.
Thank you. All right. So in my Santa Monica College class, my one of my favorite hands to show. We like watch a lot of poker hands and talk about it, right? It's the year that Jamie Gold won the main event. Was that 2006 or 2008?
I'm not exactly sure. It was, I think, the year after Hashem, because it was like the biggest one ever, probably 2006-ish.
Probably 06. It was the biggest main event ever. And you're down to the final three in the main event, right? One guy has ace 10. The flop is like 10, 6, 5, 2 spades. The flop's 10, 6, 5, 2 spades. First guy, all in with ace 10, short stack, right? Jamie Gold's got 4-3, so he's open-ended. He reshoves all in, right? 10, 6, 5, 2 spades. And then you're down to the last guy, Paul Wasika, who has 8, 7 of spades. So he's open-ended with the flush draw, and you got two guys all in front of you. And not only are you like thinking about like the immediate pay jump, but you're thinking of what it would mean to win the World Series of Poker main event, have that title. And you can see the percentages. He's like a little bit over 50% favorite with the straight and the flush draw, right? And which would
yeah. Well, because of the tray 4 has like the tray 4 needs some help there.
It needs some help, right? Well, so you're watching the percentages, and like I think he's like a 56% favorite, something very close to that, or like 54. And he's like in absolute distress. And he is like beside himself. And I think if he saw the percentages, it wouldn't help at all. If someone told you, you know what, 56% of the time, you're going to like go on and win the main event, and, with all the millions that comes with that, and then be the name and be the guy and all the everything, being the face of it. And then 45% or 44% of the time, sorry, you're out.
But you get second, actually.
But you get second.
Yeah, not the worst.
So not the worst, right? And so what happens is he folds. He would have won the hand, by the way. He would have made the flush, right? And everyone knows who Jamie Gold is, and no one knows who Paul Wasika is.
Well, I know who Paul Wasika is.
Well, okay. Well, some people. So some people do, but like mainstream, people know Jamie Gold. Whereas, like if you're sitting at a poker table at casino in Los Angeles,
most people probably don't know who Paul Wasika is. Even though Paul Waska is a beast. Even to this day, he's a beast. And I can say, like, from personal experience, I've played with Jamie Gold. I wish Paul Waska would have called all in there. And just because what Jamie Gold did on camera was not out of the ordinary for him. Like, it was like, oh boy. Every hand that gets played was taking like 10 minutes. There was just so much talking. I'm just like, dude, please shut up, fold your hand. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
But I think Paul Waska, I think even in the moment I was rooting for Paul Waska, but probably all poker players were, I think, watching that final table play down.
Yeah, well, it's just a fun hand. You can't blame him, you know? I mean, you can just see the like magnitude of the decision and the agony and like I
think the biggest question there is that like Paul Waska had a very sizable skill advantage over Jamie Gold, I think, leading to heads up. But still, that's like a spot it's very tough to pass up because you don't know if you're going to get anything comparable moving forward just through the nature of like heads up poker, right?
Totally. Yeah, the swings there, absolutely. So
it's a good hand. That's a really fun hand.
I know it's a fun hand. You can watch it on YouTube. Yeah, it's like, or in my class, but it's so good. And it's like, yeah, I wonder about that hand, you know, all the time.
What about Farha, right? Farha could have just called Moneymaker's bluff. Like, there's a lot of these hands where just like sort of the fate of poker like hinged on this one decision, or like, I actually think though, as it relates to the Moneymaker Farha thing, I think somebody would have taken up the baton and poker would have exploded. I think it was just like right on the verge, and somebody else could have been Moneymaker, could have done the Moneymaker effect. But yeah, that's another one that's like, wow, really big deal that Farha folded when Moneymaker ran that big bluff.
Yeah. And then, you know, a few hands prior, Moneymaker got very lucky against Phil Ivey.
Yeah, with like 9 left.
Yeah, it was like the final table bubble.
I think it was a set of 9s, and the flop was like queen 9 something. The turn was a queen, and the river they got it all in, and the river was an ace.
Yeah, Phil Ivey, exactly. Phil Ivey had a set, and Chris Moneymaker said top pair, and it just came run.
You just runner boat, no big deal.
Runner boat, and people, you know, but all you get is the accolades for. Which understandable, right? You know, the sun run.
Well,
I'm getting first. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the nature of high variance in tournaments that like you can do all the right things and get the exact wrong result, and nobody knows who the fuck you are 20 years from now. Except, well, everybody does kind of know who Phil Ivey is, but that's that's a different story for a different day.
That is a different story. Yeah. But you know, it's just like, it's crazy how, you know, one card not only changes the outcome for the tournament, but changes, you know, who we know, right?
Exactly.
To your point about, I don't know if anyone could have, but I interviewed the gambling historian when I was writing my book, at the University of Nevada. He was amazing. His name's David Schwartz. He has his own book on like history of casinos and stuff like that. He'd probably be a good guest for your show too. But anyways, he said it wasn't just Moneymaker that made poker explode. He said it was the invention of the whole cam. And all of a sudden poker became so much more watchable. And he said, the problem is, you know, when you play, like, you don't want to play a basketball game over and over again, like a bar, because people know who wins and therefore it's not as fun to watch. But you can play a poker hand in the background and you can kind of jump in at any point, and it doesn't matter if you know who won the tournament because you don't know who won the hand. Right.
Right. And I mean, the whole card cam mixed with like satellites and online poker exploding, like all of those were like the ingredients for the poker boom.
Yeah. And, you know, it was good. It was like very Hollywood, like Sammy Farha with his like unlit cigarette and the suit versus like Chris Moneymaker.
You couldn't have arranged it better. Like you couldn't you couldn't have scripted it better than the way that it just organically turned out.
Pretty cool.
It really is. It really is. Speaking of pretty cool, right? Like we talked in our conversation last time about you meeting your now fiance that you will be married by the time this episode drops at a poker table, which is like another one of those things where you just make a decision one random night to go play poker and boom, something happens.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, so we met at a poker table in LA,
Mhm.
right? And and we talked and it was good, but he's from Ireland. He was visiting, and we weren't looking to like really start anything. So it's like we talked, we got like a drink at the bar, and then we parted our separate ways, and it was like whatever type thing, right? And 3 weeks later, it was my first time in Vegas since having learned how to play poker, and it was his first time in Vegas, like ever, visiting from Ireland. And of all the casinos in Vegas, I walk in and I see him there. And it was
Good.
pretty, yeah, it felt like, too crazy to be coincidence. And that was 3 years ago, and we've been together ever since. So it was like, we got like the second chance, right? It was like, what are you doing here type thing.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just gotta give in to fate, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
yeah.
I transitioned us to, your to your fiance and getting married. Let's go back to, you were talking about the Wasaka Gold 3-way hand and your class and how your class was going.
Yeah. Well, this was my first time teaching it. And then they signed me up to teach it again in September, Wednesday nights on Zoom at Santa Monica College. It was terrifying because, when I was speaking to Poker Power, we said it's just so absolutely important that this is a completely different program. And I completely understand that. And, what we offer at Poker Power is we offer hands-on instruction. And you really get to practice playing. And the idea is you've never played poker ever. And we just really hold your hand through the whole thing. This course, the course that I teach on my own, is very different. And it's longer. It's 90 minutes. There is no in-app practice. You're not practicing playing. It's literally like a college lecture where we like watch videos, have PowerPoint notes, discuss it on a more theoretical, intellectual level. And it assumes basically the audience of that course is like, how to play poker because you've been playing with your cousin, but you don't know how to beat it at a casino yet type thing. It's like, it assumes that you already have a baseline level of knowledge of poker.
Yes.
And want to like transition to intermediate. So it was terrifying because it was completely me like creating the curriculum for that. And I needed to, take care to make sure it was something completely different. And then it's also 90 minutes, right? So like creating PowerPoints and like classes that last 90 minutes long was really tough. But, I had such tremendous retention. As a matter of fact, I didn't even have anyone drop the class, and it was almost completely, not only was it pretty much perfect attendance every day, but people that had to miss a class, they always asked for a recording of it.
Wow.
So I took that as like a really, really high success rate. So I'm very proud of it.
You're talking about creating a 90-minute PowerPoint presentation. How many days a week and
One
how
day
long?
A week, 6 weeks.
So six of these.
Okay.
Okay. That's a lot of work. It's not undoable, I guess. It's doable. You're like a 60-minute PowerPoint presentation. I do one of these a month for poker coaching. That's like 60 minutes PowerPoint. And like, they can range from taking me, depending on my level of laziness that month. Sometimes it's like reviewing a student video or just aggregating questions that I answer. Those are like the easy mode webinars that I do. But like when you build something from scratch and like you have to research it and you have to tie everything together and you have to make it linear and you have to like make sure that people are understanding it. I mean, this is like a 10-hour journey for me to put together one hour PowerPoint presentation. And like, that's a lot. That's a lot of energy into this one thing. And so, yeah, 6 90-minute ones, that's a lot of effort that you had to go through, and a lot of like logistical planning too, of like, how do we structure this thing? Where do we go from each week to each week? Because for people who haven't taught, that's just part of the process that is, it can be tough.
Oh, absolutely. You know what? I found was resonating the most were just literally watching those poker hands on YouTube, but like talking about it and like pausing it and being like, what's going on here? And being able to like with that Paul Waska hand, talk about all the other factors, like you said, like, you know what, there's a skill edge to factor in as well. I believe Jonathan Little, he said before, he's like, which makes sense. He's like, the greater you believe your skill edge to be, the less marginal spots you have to take.
Right. It's there was a hand described from forever ago, Miami John Cernuto versus Daniel Negreanu. They were heads up, and Negreanu basically said, John Cernuto has a skill edge against me, and because he does, I'm just going to play very high variance and just look to get the money in very often in high variance spots so that it kind of reduces or minimizes the skill edge that John Cernuto has against me. And there was a few important takeaways for me from that statement is that like, it's pretty cool to see the level of self-awareness that he had in the moment, recognizing that like John Cernuto is a better player than me at this stage in our careers. And then two, like, how do we go about neutralizing that edge without just like going into passive mode and trying to get into these like super deep spots where John Cernuto is likely going to outplay me? It's like, yeah, let's ramp up the variance so that, I make it more of a crapshoot so that I can get lucky and minimize the skill edge, which, yeah, it's just a very intelligent way of thinking about poker.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the last classes we do in my SMC one is Daniel Negreanu has that series Old School versus New School, where he like talks about the same hand and how his thinking was back in the day when he played the hand, and then how we think about it now. And so we like, talk about how things have changed, like GTO versus exploitative and all that stuff. So it's great getting into Daniel Negreanu's head and how he analyzes it. I remember when I was first learning poker and I picked up a bunch of poker books, and most of them I couldn't understand, which is what inspired me to write mine. But there was one that was actually pretty good. It was like part of the Kill Phil series. And basically I remember it said that if you ever get to the final table and your head's up and you don't know how to play, go all in every hand. And that's just what and it's the same it's like, you know what, if you're a beginner and just don't know how to play heads up at all, by trying to make it 50-50, you definitely have a better shot than if you were to try to play on your own, if you're just starting off.
Right. I mean, 7 deuce off has 35% equity against ace king, right? So like basically the earlier decisions in the tree, the equities run much closer together. And the later decisions in the tree, so the river, they run very far apart because it's either 100 or 0, right? So like at each stage of the game, the equities kind of diverge. So like pre-flop, they're the closest. On the flop, they're a little bit more spaced out. On the turn, they're a lot spaced out to where like a lot of equities run like 80-20, and then the river is 100-0. So engaging where the equities run much closer is just, it's a smart way to go about it if you don't really know what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't even think of it that way, but that completely makes sense. Yeah.
I've had to think about these things. This is this is something that gets stated like in my private coaching sessions, just all the time. I use this. The podcast listener can't see, but I have these like diamond pins that my wife uses to give out for her to our clients at her business. But like this is how I imagine equities in my head of like this is pre-flop at the beginning, and like this is the flop. And this is the turn, and then like this is the river, and they just get farther apart at each stage of the game tree.
For those of you on the podcast, if you know like the less than or greater sign, it looks like that, like a shark mouth.
Yeah, the shark mouth.
The shark mouth, right, where it's like at the little point, or like a V, like a sidewards V at the little point that's close together, and then it just further and further and further apart.
Exactly. So are you teaching this again? Like, is this like an ongoing gig? And I guess the good news is once you've made your slideshows and presentations, you can kind of repurpose them, and it's a lot easier moving forward.
Exactly. I am definitely teaching it Wednesday nights in September through Santa Monica College. I'm not sure if I'm going to teach it after. It's been very fun, a lot of fun, also a lot of work. And they're also, this has been great during COVID. They've allowed us to teach online. as you know, teaching a live poker class is a lot more cumbersome when it comes to like, then they expect you to shuffle and deal cards and like all these things, which then your ability to teach as many people just goes way down.
Yeah, and you need to be getting paid pretty well, I think, living near UC Santa Barbara, right?
Santa Monica.
Santa Monica.
Yeah, even more.
Even still, that's it might be worse.
Yeah, Santa Monica College. Exactly. So, they've talked to me about it. Like, can we bring it live? To which I'm kind of like, no. Plus, I like that you don't have to deal with LA traffic, right? When you're, online and you can be from anywhere and all these things. And then there's the fact that, since it's only 6 weeks, and people are paying for it, they want that recording if they miss a class. I had like people say to me like, hey, I'm going on a trip with my family. I want to sign up for your class, but can I record the session that I'm going to miss that week? And that makes sense, right? Since you're paying for it. But so I don't know if I'm going to teach it after this September 6 weeks. I'm going to see. Probably teach again in the future, but it's been a lot. It's been a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's a good experience nonetheless, and something to
absolutely
keep you occupied during the pandemic lockdown stuff. I think the last time we talked too, your book, it had been released, but it hadn't been, I guess, promoted and all of the things because of obviously the pandemic stuff. So how has your book done since the past conversation to today?
It's starting to just kind of like pick up a little bit of momentum gradually. So it's doing better now, which I'm very happy about. And I think, Poker Power has been incredibly supportive as well. We give the book away at lots of events. So better, we're going to see during the World Series of Poker, my publisher, D&B Poker, they usually have a booth there, but I'm not sure if we're going to this year, given all the logistics and who knows now what's
uncertainties.
Going on with WSOP. Yeah, and uncertainties because and they're based abroad, so it's a lot to coordinate. So we'll whenever the world opens up, we'll do like a book signing and like formal like run out and promotion. But right now, it's kind of behind the scenes picking up.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine your partnership with Poker Power is been really good for the book, just because like that's a natural audience that would be receptive and want to read it. So like that sort of connection just makes a ton of sense as it relates to like generating book sales, increasing audience, and all the stuff.
Absolutely. And, it's amazing the team and the quality of instructors we have. I'm very lucky. I have a book with the world's biggest poker book publisher, and I am completely dwarfed, by the other women on our team. We have Xuan Liu, who I believe is in like the top 20 top female poker pros in the world. She's got a hand in mob, all right? She's gotten the millions, right? And she's incredible, very, very kind person. And then Kaina England, one of our instructors, she has had the most amazing run this year. I believe on the GPI, like Global Poker Index, she's one of in the top 10 ranked female players, like right up there with Kristen Bicknell. And she had a really, really big tournament score a few months ago. And then over summer, this is still summer, but like in July, she was at it was that big tournament. And of the final table, where there's like $1 million up top, and of the final table, of the final 6 players, 3 of them were women. And she ended up being the last woman standing. And I believe she got 4th for like $500,000. And she just teaches, like our Thursday classes with me. And like, so does Xuan, and so do I. And, even like one of our other instructors, like tournament director, we just have like, it's really, really incredible. And I think it just shows how dedicated we all are to the mission.
It's like the best mission that I could imagine. I mean, for the longest time, I've talked about like the next poker boom is getting more females into the world of poker. Like why is my podcast audience 97% male, right? Like why are we benching women for this like beautiful mind sport where like it should be accessible to everybody. And I think there's a lot of marketing and branding and obviously real life logistical issues that kind of come into play as it relates to like having babies and raising children and like all that side of it, where you just don't have enough time to pursue a hobby like in earnest. But still, like to me, it's just, y'all are doing the work that really matters in growing poker. And so, yeah, I know Doc, who's in my Slack channel.
She's a streamer, amazing instructor too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. She's actually been coming to like Poker Power Hour for the last year and a half or so. So I'm very, very proud of her getting out there, teaching, doing the work of making poker more accessible and bringing in more women to play this game of poker. That's just a great game. And yeah, so that's my little spiel on the work that y'all are doing. I think it's just, I couldn't be happier that somebody out there is doing it and having success too, right? It's not like you're just floundering around. You're actually, making progress.
Well, the funny thing is, Poker Power was started by business women and not by poker players, right? So it's like, the founders of our company are like in the class, and like trying to like, we're trying to teach them how to play poker while they're like rolling out this mission. So it's been amazing being with the organization and streamlining, dealing with women whose forte is in business.
It had to be that way. I think,
had to be that way. Yeah, it could. Yeah.
If it were poker players trying to start the business, it would have not have gone as smoothly as it's going. I promise.
Probably, yeah. But to your point of getting women in casinos, and of these hyper powerful, competent women, my boss, our general manager and director at Poker Power, Erin Leiden, who is incredible, and I believe she's given 2 TED Talks, right? And she's just one of these very, very accomplished women. And she gives a lot of our videos and kind of represents the power and composure that, we want to stand for. And she was terrified of playing poker in a casino, like absolutely terrified. And we were in Vegas, right? And it was like, I was like, hey, you're in Vegas the same time as me. Let's go, And she was shaking in her, I would say shaking in her boots, but shaking in her heels. Because she's like also like, super fashionable. But anyways, and we, now we're thinking about rolling out a program where literally which I piloted with her, where, we sit behind you and we just kind of like take notes in your hands. Obviously you can't advise, like we're playing the role of the girlfriend, right? Like you see at the casinos, sit behind you. You just have someone who's there with you. So you're not going to a scary casino all on your own. And then, so you're playing more consciously. At the same time, I'm just kind of, as I'm sweating, I'm just taking notes of your cards and then we discuss it later.
Yeah. The girlfriend sweating has always been a strange thing to me in live poker too. I remember at Commerce and there's this dude, he played poker every day, probably 12 hours. And like his girlfriend was with him like every day for 12 hours, like just kind of sweating him, sitting right behind him. And I was like, doesn't that get boring? Like, I feel like that would get so boring.
They don't know how to play. My worst things, I always want to like help the girlfriend. And I remember like one time I was at Hollywood Park Casino in Los Angeles. And this girl was like sitting behind her boyfriend who was not a good player. And, he ends up losing and they're getting very stressed out because he's losing, right? And he ends up losing all his money on like an ace-high board when he has kings and multiple people go all in front of him. It is very clear someone has an ace, okay? This is apparent. And he calls with kings and he loses all his money. And the girlfriend turns to me and she goes, did he do the right thing? and I was like, and he said he had a 7% chance of winning. It's like, I don't know, like how do you, it's like, so all the time, because it's like, and a lot of times they try to be friendly to me because I'm like another girl at the table, right? But then it gets very awkward when like the boyfriend and I are in hands together, because usually you see that more frequently at the lower buy-ins, right? Where people are more likely to be making mistakes. It's not like it's just not as common at like a 5-10.
It can be. Depends on the 5-10.
Well, yeah, depends.
Depends on the 5-10. But yeah,
it happens all the time at like a 2-3.
Yes,
Like,
every single hand, pretty much. There's
yeah. So you see a lot of that, and and I find that to be very funny.
yeah, kind of put on the spot there. Did he play that okay? And you're like, uh-oh.
No, like literally, like he should not. He was terrible. Okay, he was a terrible poker player. And I remember there was like a different hand with a different couple where the girl was being like super smiley, super nice, super friendly, super sweet. And then I stacked her boyfriend, and her face, she went like ice, and she was like, almost like, how could I do that to them? Like, whereas, by the way, I flopped quads and I checked, and he just started betting. So it wasn't like my fault here. And
well, you don't even have to qualify it, because like by the nature of you sitting at a poker table, your job is to take everyone's money. But yes, I see how that could get uncomfortable.
it can. And that's something that we're trying to foster at Poker Power, is that really competitive spirit. Because we've had women who have won tickets to we have a charity tournament that we work with, right? And they feel so bad for having knocked out one of the women. They say, "Can I give her my ticket?" And we're like, that's not the concept here. This is about embracing the win and and trying to climb the ladder and all this stuff. It's like having that competitive spirit, which is really difficult because a lot of women, and including myself when I first got started, they want to play poker for social reasons, right? They're not necessarily motivated. Not all of, just some of the, population, they're not motivated by the big win. They're motivated more like, oh, this sounds fun and I want to play with my girlfriends. And I think that's a natural entry point because that's how I started as well until I got into it.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, they just have to understand, this is the game. This is the point. This is the purpose. We're in this. It is a competition, right? And at the end of the day, we're here to beat each other's brains in. But be friends, away from the table, or when we're not involved in a pot with each other. We can be nice and friendly, but when we're involved, it's like stone cold, cutthroat, let's go to war type situation.
I've had women ask me point blank, why would I ever bluff? And it just shows there's such a big gap,
Why do they ask that question?
Because I think they don't understand that you're playing to win this. You're not playing to pass time and to hang in there. Whereas I think then when you're just beginning, you're just trying not to lose all your money, right?
Does it have anything to do with the deception element of the game, like bluffing being related to maybe lying or deception?
We had a very great speaker, and she's a very successful woman who also plays poker. And she said, as women, we are taught to all, especially men too, but especially as women, we are taught to always be so honest, hard on our sleeve, very genuine, right? And she's like, that is not always the best strategy in business. Sometimes, you want to play your cards close to the vest.
Yeah, you have to maintain edge, because the people you're playing against are trying to gain an edge somehow. Just in poker and in business and in life.
Absolutely. So we, the more I think we teach at Poker Power, the more we find how it becomes relevant in business, and absolutely how important it is.
The decision to enter a hand is fundamental to poker strategy. Too tight, and they know what you have. Too loose, and you're easy to run over. Pre-flop bootcamp from Chasing Poker Greatness is a comprehensive guide to locking down your pre-flop game and creating true range advantage. 8 days of guided training, over 60 optimal ranges, and access to a dedicated community of players that will push your pre-flop game from a place of weakness to your greatest strength. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com/bootcamp. Available now.
Before boot camp, I had been playing for maybe 15 years, somewhat seriously, always trying to get better, jumping from learning program to different learning programs and training site to training site. Kind of feeling a little bit lost, not really knowing how to go about getting better. And pre-flop boot camp just felt like a great starting point, a way for me to move from being a losing player to possibly a winning player. It felt like the right first step.
Once you jumped in boot camp, what was your experience like?
Well, first off, I realized that I'd been making a lot of mistakes prior to boot camp, kind of learning what ranges should look like and what hands should be played and what situations. It was exciting because I could see what other people had been doing to me, what I had been missing in my game. And then from there, just the whole camaraderie of everybody that's signed up, working together, trying to achieve that goal. That was fun. That's pushing each other and really helping one another, kind of feeling like you're a part of a team. It was a great experience. I enjoyed the process and I learned a lot.
What was your experience like playing cards post boot camp?
It's a totally different experience. It put me in a position to be successful as opposed to always being behind the eight ball and playing catch up. I really feel like it's the foundation of a solid poker game. And since boot camp, I've been able to turn a profit and keep building on what I learned there. Being able to go back into the group and really work together even after boot camp was over. It's been awesome.
What's your sample size of winning post boot camp?
I think I have 70,000 hands played by now. I'm a father and I have a job, so I'm not a professional player by any means. That's my sample size.
Pre-flop Bootcamp is the flagship Chasing Poker Greatness training program. If you'd like to dramatically upgrade your pre-flop game, a new bootcamp launches on the last Saturday of every single month, and your link to join is chasingpokergreatness.com/bootcamp. One more time, that's chasingpokergreatness.com/bootcamp, all one word, or you can click through in the description box of this episode. What are some stories from Poker Power of people progressing that you're proud of?
One of my students, Kim Coles, she played, it's that charity tournament that we work with, right? But I believe that first place, I don't know if it's 5,000 in cash or 5,000 in gift cards, but she never played poker before, never played a hand of live poker before. This is all digital, it's all during COVID, right? But she was very, very good student coming to our classes. And all of us instructors play that tournament too. So she's up against, regular poker players as well. She won first place. So that was absolutely amazing. I believe she's now training with us as an instructor too. So
she's like, yeah, this poker thing, it's fun. I want to keep doing this.
Yeah, I wanted exactly. And so we're like so proud of that. And then even just when we talk to our women, like there's this one woman and super nice, super shy, just like a really quiet, like earnest, personality. Right. And she said, you know what, if you had told me when I first started this that I would get anything out of poker for my life, I would have never believed you. And now, not only does she play poker, in our classes and our community games, but her company now has a weekly women's poker group, and she participates in that every single time.
Yeah. You got to experience it. Once you experience it clicks. It's like, oh, I get it now. I see how this is related to all the other things.
Yeah, my father. Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead.
My father has two sayings. He says, one, everything I learned about business, I learned from the poker table. Two, in business, you never get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm jealous of y'all, by the way, for traveling around and doing events and all this stuff. It sounds like fun. I've been in this pandemic for too long. When the pandemic started, the podcast was like sort of new, it was like 4 months old or so. And then now we're closing in on 2 years, and like I've barely traveled, I've barely gone anywhere, barely had any live interaction with other human beings. All my private coaching is digital. All my course stuff is digital. Just these podcast interviews, they're all digital. It's like I'm so envious of you all out there traveling around having fun. Somebody who's listening to this right now, Matt Savage, what are you doing? Like, pick me up. Put me in, coach. Like, let's do something on the WPT. Get me out of the house. I'm like going insane.
Yeah.
That's my call out. That's why putting it out there in the world for somebody and seeing what happens.
Totally. Yeah, Matt Savage, if you're listening, I'd love to be a commentator.
hey, one person at a time, Savage. She's got enough good things going on for her right now. Let's talk to Brad first.
It's funny on the subject of commentary. So Melanie Weisner, you're right, the professional poker player, she helped us a lot with their curriculum, and I was working with her too. And when we do show clips of poker hands to our women at Poker Power, a lot of them are really, really old poker hands, and they're really old school. And I asked her why that is, and she says, the commentary is simpler. She said, like, nowadays, you listen to the commentators talk about a hand, and it's not like, oh my gosh, he's got a straight and a flush draw. It's like, this is a hand where you have just so much equity. Like, how can you ever think of folding? It's just so much more technical, which is great for like people that are really into poker and studious, and makes it you don't outgrow it that way, I think. But in terms of getting more beginners into the game, I think it would be great to kind of go back to that, or even the way they did the main event, like just a lot of very simple commentary where it's not too difficult and it's explaining what's going on rather than adding another layer to it, which I think is how it is now. And
being more entertaining as well. The point is to entertain the audience, right? Not bore them to tears. Bore them to tears. And Norman Chad came on the podcast again. I don't know the time frame. Everything blends together. But he came on the show and he said that, like, looking back on his commentary for like the Moneymaker WSOP run, he's like, I'm just so ashamed of how little I knew. But like, I think the thing is, for all the beginners, I mean, that's like the entry point. That's like what spawned the Moneymaker boom. And it was in part through the commentary of, Norman Chad and Lon McEachern?
Lon McCarran?
Lon McCarran. I don't know why I said McEachern. Lon McCarran and Norman Chad. And like, it wasn't like super technical. It wasn't super advanced, but it brought a ton of people into the poker world. And this is like, we have to bear in mind what the purpose of these ventures are. And if the purpose is to bring in more people, we have to simplify the commentary to make it more entertaining, more understandable. And the people that are already in the poker world, they don't actually need the commentators to start talking about like the ranges and the in-depth equity discussions, because they have a high level of understanding all that stuff anyway. So yeah, I'm absolutely with you. I was just kidding earlier, Matt Savage, bring in Amanda too for the commentary. Just don't leave me out in the cold. I need to get out of my house.
You didn't see that, yeah. Cheesy poker jokes, and it's like we talk about like, don't get married to your hand, and I'm always like, marry people, not cards. Just like stuff like that where it just kind of keeps you going. We're actually starting to do on Twitch for our Friday games. This week I'm actually going to be co-hosting. Usually it's with Doc, where for our Poker Power game, for our beginners, these are not people playing, as you would expect. For our beginner women, we stream it on Twitch, and then we have us as instructors commentate on it in a way that's for that audience.
Yeah, that's
for the beginner audience.
Yeah, that's a good program and platform and way to teach, I think. And what platform are you using, by the way, for the players?
Twitch.
Oh no, poker platform. Poker platform.
Currently, we're using the Poker 2 app, where Poker Power is in the process of developing our own app, but I cannot give you a timeline on that. So eventually, we want to be able to have our own platform.
So, in the meantime, there's an app called Poker Castle. And Doc saw it actually last week during Poker Power Hour. But Poker Castle, basically, it's got a functionality where you can invite people in, and then like the instructor or the coach has like God mode on, so like they can see everybody's cards at the same time.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually, and the UI, the interface is like really clean and looks really nice. And that to me has been like just a really good up and coming project. And also it was developed by like a single developer who's a female in Germany, I think, too. So again, I think you guys connecting, I think you have a lot of synergy there that would be very useful for commentating specifically. Because like as the coach, you kind of like God mode is very important so that you can see what everybody's doing and see the mistakes. Another feature they have too is like, if somebody folds, then they can have God mode on themselves so they can see what everybody else has and see what everybody's doing so that they can like learn while the hand's going down. Then there's a replay function where you can like replay it back and give feedback at every single spot. So yeah, it's just a really cool platform if you haven't checked that out.
Oh, thank you for the recommendation. Yeah, I'll run it by our team. Absolutely.
Yeah. And plus, like normally when I do these meetings and I like shown software pitched on something, they almost always end horribly. They go horribly wrong. It's just like I'm like, God, this is a waste of my time. Like, why are we doing this? But this
what's the worst thing you've been pitched? I'm
not gonna. They might be listening. I'm not gonna go in depth. But there's just some things that I think are maybe good ideas in theory, or maybe good ideas by people who aren't really in the poker space. But then the practicality of it is like, yeah, this is not very practical for the audience. So yeah, I think that's, I don't want to kill anybody, because I do think it's important too that you try solving these problems and come up with new projects and products and software, even if they're not all home runs. Enough of them will be useful that it benefits the whole ecosystem. Yeah, so going back to the commentary aspect of that on Twitch, where can the listener of Chasing Poker Greatness find this Twitch stream? What's the URL?
URL, it's either Poker Power with an H. I'm not sure yet because we're going through some branding. Basically, if they go to our website, pokerpower.com, and scroll down to the very, very bottom and click events, the link's right there.
And that's poker, POKER,
We're actually in the process of changing just to straight power. So that's brand new. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
because
it's going to be Poker Power. Yeah, I know, because it has been with the H.
Mm-hmm.
So in the future, look forward to Poker Power, just straight power.
And you don't have to listen to me mangle the name, because I never heard anybody pronounce it. And pretty sure I called it Poker Power for like 6 months before somebody was like, no, it's just Poker Power. I was like, oh, the H is silent.
I don't run the like marketing stuff, but maybe that's one of the reasons behind the change.
Probably.
Yeah.
So we'll close up this round 2 with you on here by asking some lightning round questions. And just like the first time, they're not very lightning-y. They can take some time if we need it. What's a purchase you've made in this past year that you found to be impactful to your poker game?
Oh, yeah. I got a coach, and he was a steal, to be honest, and amazing. And I can't remember the website I found him, but his name's John Bradley. And he is like on one of these little stables, and he's incredible. And you know how I knew he was actually a good poker player? Because in Mexico, I've been playing a little bit on GG, right? And I recognized his name, and I had him marked as a really good, as an aggressive reg, right? And you can, on GG, like shows winnings. He has like 1.5 million in winnings. And what's been so enlightening is how much he goes through data, right? And he's just like, a crunch the numbers kind of guy. And some of the things have been fascinating, have been absolutely fascinating that he's
like
taught.
what? Like what?
2 big things. One, he experimented with, so right now it's really fashionable, especially the high levels, to limp the small blind, right? To complete the small blind. So what he did is he tried that. He has all of his tens of thousands of hands. And then he tried it compared to raising with his junky hands, the small blind, right? When he raised with his junky hands, he averaged like a negative 0.25 big blinds.
Which is good.
Yeah,
Because
it's pretty, yeah.
It's better than negative 0.5, so that's good.
Right. So when he raises his junk hands, he's like at a small loss there, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he limps his junk hands, and you can see the graph, it's just like complete straight downward trajectory, like down negative button, and it was like shocking seeing the graph. And obviously this doesn't apply if you're playing like the $1 million high roller bowl type things or $300,000 high roller bowls, but when you're playing $55 tournaments, you might not want to be adopting everything the pros are doing. And then the thing that for me personally was very enlightening with my poker game is, so I don't basically, I was rating the cutoff with enough hands, but on the button, I wasn't, right? And I think I was actually raising like less hands on the button than I was on the cutoff, or very close, right? And I said, yeah, because no one's going to give me any credibility and they're just going to re-raise me because they know I'm button raising, right? So that's kind of how I get into my head about it. And then they 3-bet me from the smaller big blind, and then I feel like I have to call because the whole leveling game there, right? And he said, honestly, if you look at the percentage, the small blind and the big blind 3-bet you, collectively, it's 25%, so 12.5% each, right? 25%. And he's like, that may seem like a lot. And in my mind, I was like, that's it? That's it? Like, I thought they were doing it like 35%. Because
Sure.
like in my mind, I'm just kind of.
Well, you're biased. You're biased. You feel it more when you get 3-bet than when it just goes through.
That's what he said too. Yeah. Yeah. You feel it more, right? And you remember it more. And he's like, also 12.5% each means that there's going to be a lot of good hands thrown into there. Like maybe they have like a few light ones, but that's going to be at least half, right? Weighted towards actual good hands. And he said, when you're playing against the general population, he said, at best, they're bluffing at the right frequency. Most people are under bluffing. Right. And so just
especially out of the big blind too.
Yeah, especially out of the big blind, all these things. So that's been really, really great speaking with him about it. So I would say that's probably been my best investment. And it's great that when you have the data and you have someone that knows how to walk you through it, that's a big caveat, right? I think a lot of people can get ahead, but don't know how to interpret it really. That's like a whole nother skill set, which I'm still learning. You can take all your emotions out of it and all your bias out of it.
Well, you can try. You can neutralize it to a point.
I know.
It's still like in practice you can, and then you still have to execute on the strategies that in the arena when you have anxiety and pressure, and that's like a whole nother. That's more performance issue than it is like a tactical issue, though. But yes, the data is like everything. I think that all of my training now is very specific to analyzing massive amounts of data, understanding what populations are doing, and then creating strategies based on what people are actually doing. And I think it's really good that in a private poker teacher, somebody that's willing to experiment and willing to learn and willing to measure and analyze what's going on over the long run, instead of just using like anecdotal evidence to back up any sort of strategic suggestions, because like we need to be way more scientific than I think we typically are in the poker community, measure things and then see if like practically this makes sense. And most of the time, at least in my experience, and I've been playing this game as a professional for most of my adult life, and there are lots of things by analyzing the data that are not intuitive, that you just don't have visibility of when you're just in the arena. You have to kind of look at the zoomed out perspective to really upgrade how you think about these situations.
Right. And something, that he was saying on that note is like, sometimes there's a difference between what it makes sense that you can teach to a large population of people versus what's actually optimal play.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just, we both know as instructors, you just have to make something that's actionable, without overcomplicating and injecting too much complexity so that people can't. People have the information and it's better than a more simplified strategy, but they can never do it. So like it's not valuable in the least bit.
Oh yeah, I literally my whole reputation at Poker Power is I'm the teacher that tells everyone to fold. Right, like that's just like my thing. It's like I try to make up for it by being like bubbly and outgoing and nice, right? And I am the strictest teacher at Poker Power. And like when we introduce like which cards to play, right? I always say like, hey, whenever I get in an Uber car, they say, hey, what do you do? I say, hey, I got a book about poker. And they say, great, how do I get better at poker? The answer is fold. If you're asking that question, you are probably not folding enough hands.
I did a Q&A for the Hersdeman group maybe last month. And that was one of the questions was like, what do I do? Like, what do I do to get better at poker? It's like, and my answer to that is and will always be like understand your pre-flop strategy. Spend a lot of time committing your pre-flop strategy to memory. Don't just like feel like you know it because you've got some grids that are like, you've printed them out and they're like in your desk drawer. You looked at them for 5 minutes and then just totally discounted them. Like that's why everything starts for me with pre-flop bootcamp in my students and my audience. And like I won't coach any player that doesn't have a strong fundamental pre-flop strategy. Like it's part of the process for me is like, if this is like learnable, right? Like this shows you're willing to put in the energy and learn these 65 grids and understand how poker is supposed to be played at the first decision point in the tree. And if you can't invest energy doing that, you got no hope any deeper in the tree. Like you just got no hope, right? Like if something is learnable in this game, you better commit it to memory. Like there's no excuse.
Yeah, when I first started playing poker and, I was very fortunate that 3 months later, I entered my first poker tournament, I won first place. Well, what happened in those 3 months? I made 180 flashcards of which cards to play in which seats. And that was it. It's not like, I had good bet sizing. It's not like I knew good tells. It's not like anything like that. But it was just, I made these 180 flashcards. They were color coded with stickers, and I just would drill them on which cards to play in which seats. And when you're just trying to beat a daily casino tournament, a lot of times that's enough. That's enough to, at least get you past the first 50% of the field.
It's a fundamental, it's a foundational strategy upon which all the other strategies hinge. And little metaphor was there was a Golden State Warriors game. It was 5, 6, 7 years ago. I can't even remember many of the details. I know it was a playoff game and Klay Thompson broke the 3-point record, 14 threes or something like that in the game. And I saw somebody ask the question of how many dribbles did Klay Thompson take in that game? Like when he caught the ball and shot it, like how many dribbles in between those 14 3-point shots? And the answer was he took one dribble, like one dribble. They were all catch and shoot. And when somebody asks like, what do I do to improve at basketball? Well, I can tell you Klay Thompson is probably practicing his shot over and over and over again, just catching it and shooting it. And like poker, pre-flop play is fundamental, so practice it until you get it down. And I could go in depth about like all the problems it creates downstream of like you play too many hands, you're going to be overfolding, you can't manage your ranges well because you've just got too many combos. Like if you think about the small blind versus the big blind, right? This is always a tough spot to play because you have so many combos to manage. And like if you're doing that at every single spot at the table, yeah, clearly it's going to be very, very difficult for you to have success.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I see what you're saying in that it makes your decisions not as solid down
it does. And that's something that like people don't always wrap their mind around because you don't get direct feedback, right? Like Klay, he gets direct feedback, right? The shot clanks or he makes it. So, with pre-flop strategy, like people will ask, well, how did I play this hand on the river? And it's like, well, you made 4 mistakes getting to the river. So like we could talk about the river, but like that's not going to bear much fruit. We need to talk about how you got here in the first place, right?
Absolutely right. And the whole as played, right? Then when you do, yeah.
As played.
Yeah, as played. Yeah, when you got yourself into this mess. Exactly.
It's interesting, like as played just used as a qualifier, because I think like it means that there's some awareness that they made a mistake at an earlier point in the tree.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, then like why are we even bothering to look at this hand as played? Because like we're kind of we're accepting that the strategy that they chose to deploy is acceptable up to this point just by virtue of analyzing the spot. So like as played should just get thrown out the window and like, yeah, let's not even look at this because like this is just not good enough to look at. We need to like look at spots where look at the situations that you're actually messing up so that they bear fruit instead of these spots that just whatever, you should never be in it. So like, what does it matter if we break it down or we don't?
Right. Like that's the thing. Like everyone enjoys like, what do you do when you got 7-4 spades and you have like the funky gut shot or something like that? It's because you're, in the hand with like a marginal, that's why your decisions are going to be a lot more wonky and it's going to be harder to navigate and all that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I told you I got us lost in the lightning round.
That's okay.
Don't know
where
we're
last
at.
Point though, before we get more in lightning round, I'm sorry, when sometimes I get asked, especially by women, like, how do I get more confident, going to the casino, or whatever tournament? How do I get to the table? Because I'm scared. I really believe knowledge is power. If you already have that first decision figured out, what cards to play, the pre-flop fundamentals, it's going to help you so much.
And two, another bit of knowledge, like if you're playing like the 1-3 game,
yeah,
every single player sitting there is most likely a fish. So again, that should help the confidence level that like nobody that's playing there has much of an idea that's going on, or like, 10 to 20% of people. So carry that with you too. That should help you feel a little bit more confident as well. Absolutely. What's a poker related thing that other folks rave about that hasn't worked for you?
I'm not a big, I don't use pot odds too much, and I feel like when I understand the importance and like it will, help with like some decisions, but like whenever we teach our poker math lesson to women, a lot of times they feel like they need to master pot odds, right? They really, really need to get it. But I feel like, especially when you're playing a tournament, and that's what we, talk about at Poker Power, it's not just about getting the right equity, but it's about so many other things. Like maybe, like with the Paul Oscar hand we just talked about, like maybe you think you have a skill edge and you'll be, better positioned in a different way. Or like, maybe you have a ton of chips and even if you're getting the right price, you don't want to be committing all your chips in the situation. So stuff like that, I think when people are really, really married to the math, I think that there are other things when you're playing tournament poker that want to factor into your decision a little more highly. And also, when you're looking at how many outs you're having, well, then you might have bluff outs too, right? Like maybe, here's your likelihood of hitting your straight, but you can rep the flush as well. So you can kind of create your own math that way.
My all the students in my community are just like, she's talking shit about the pot odds. That's going to be problematic. I think like in the cash game street specifically, like pot odds, I think what's interesting about pot odds is like even my super high level guys that play 1K and L for a living, a lot of times will mess up pot odds. And I think it's actually hard for humans to wrap their mind around pot odds. Like when you're getting 3-1 that you're supposed to lose 75% of the time and you just call anyway if you think you're going to win like 30%. Or like the other side of it, bluffing, like how often does this bluff need to work in order for it to be profitable? That's another like pot odds calculation. Yeah. So yeah, I'm a big fan of pot odds. It's pot odds are my thing, Amanda.
Oh my God. I'm never getting invited back on the podcast, everyone.
No, I understand what you're saying. And I think that like for very beginner and early entry level players, especially in tournaments, maybe pot odds don't play as big of a role. I don't know. I'm not willing to make that statement, but I'll accept your statement.
Noted. They're like fires like burning within.
No. Have you ever strongly believed something about poker, only to change your mind later on, and then what led to that change, besides pot odds?
It's fun, yeah, right? Yes, actually, yeah, it's actually not that hard. When I first played poker, I thought body language, not a big deal, not a big deal. And the more and more I play, the more I've completely changed my tune on that. And you know, to me, it all starts with how you pick up your cards, because nobody, unless they're like leveling and stuff, but like nobody at like a basic poker table looks at a pair of aces and studies them and like holds their cards up. It's like, wow, I got aces. What they do is they look at the aces and they put them right back down because they don't want anyone to know they have aces. But when they're kind of studying their hand, they got like jack eight of clubs, and they're like, can I play this? Can I play this right? And, just even, and then there are other things too. And like when I'm playing online, I really, really factor in timing tells like immensely. And there's so many decisions that I've done differently now based on tells and information that previously was not part of my game at all. And even when the time my book came out, I said, like I interviewed Joe Navarro, who's like a body language expert, is like dabbled in poker, as someone who could speak credibly about body language. But I said, this is not something I really incorporate into my game, like at all. I was more of like a pre-flop flashcards kind of person, charts and things like that. And now I've just completely changed my tune on it. And I also think that just understanding as best you can the like MO of the person you're playing against, like the psychology, does this person like to put pressure on people? Are they the kind of person that wants to put you into a spot, because I think myself, I naturally, like with that, what we're talking about with the being 3-bet and the small and the big blind, I naturally am thinking, oh my goodness, you know what? They're trying to like, be over aggressive because I lean aggressive, and not everyone's like that. And just trying to really be able to like get in the heads of people. And all that body language does is it doesn't tell you how good a player's hand is. It tells you how good their assessment of their hand is. And so, yeah, it's all about getting into their head.
Yeah, it's a data point that ought to be utilized. And Absolutely. It's kind of strange to me that people don't utilize it more often, especially in a live poker too.
It's hard to teach. And you know what? I think when you're first playing, you have so many other things in your headspace, so many other things to think about.
Yeah.
One, you're like, I don't know if you really have room for it. And then two, when I was first playing poker, someone could have been like jumping up and down and like, doing twirlies. And I wouldn't have known how to interpret that.
Sure.
Like it's just like things that it's very, very hard to teach.
I think it's a natural part of just poker progression over time is like the more integration of these other data points. And it's a benefit of pre-flop boot camp that is hard to describe, but people feel it when they experience it. It's like so obvious. But like the more things that you can automate and not think about, the more bandwidth you have for other data points that are coming at you. And also the more bandwidth you have for thinking about post-flop decisions. So like in the natural progression of a poker career, you start out it's like you're drinking water from, a fire hydrant, right? It's just so much information. You can't sift through it all. It's overwhelming. And then over time you start, bucketing certain things into place, and you start ironing out your strategy and figuring out where all the buttons are and how to like handle your chips and do all the things. And that just frees up more bandwidth for you to think a little bit deeper. And then as you progress, you're just always thinking a little bit deeper. You're always more relaxed and able to add in other data points that are coming to your way and see if, you ought to prioritize them over other data points, which is like mostly what poker is. It's just analyzing and prioritizing data points as they come. So yeah, I mean, it makes all the sense in the world to me that that's part of the progression. And I think it only happens like that. You can't just start out getting all this information and being able to like focus on physical tells from like day one. There's an experience that's necessary there.
Absolutely. And you can't even really judge good, bad hands, yet. So someone's interpretation of whether the hand's good or bad won't really be as relevant. I like your fire engine example. I usually say poker's like driving, right? Like when you first try to drive, there's like so many like buttons and controls and it's like, you don't know what to do. And then with time, you're chewing gum and listening to the radio, which
that's my metaphor. I use that all the time too. Funnily enough, that's really funny. Go on.
Well, it probably works better for you because that's at least how I think it is. Because I never got past that first phase. I don't have my driver's license. I am terrified of driving. So I really identify and relate with that being like, there are way too many buttons and I don't know what the other car is going to do. So yeah, I find it terrifying.
Yeah. My metaphor is typically like, I have such a horrible sense of direction that like, I could close my eyes. You could spin me around 5 times in my own house and I would get lost, like just not know where things are. But like I go to a new city, don't know where anything is. Like if I'm going to the grocery store, it's like, don't talk to me. Don't interrupt me. I'm like in the zone. Don't start the radio. No podcast. I'm focused fully on figuring out how to get to this grocery store and get back to the place where I came from. It takes all of my energy. But then, after a few weeks of going there and coming back, you just kind of make that mental map. And then all of a sudden, we can listen to the music and listen to a podcast and, you can just do it subconsciously without investing much bandwidth. And that to me is like, yeah. So well done. Great minds think alike. We got the same metaphor going. And for the listener, this is like absolutely, like I promise you, even if you can't visualize it, when you experience it, it just makes sense. And then you get it. All right. So with that said, final question here, actually 2 final questions. Are you working on any projects that you haven't mentioned yet that are near and dear to your heart that you'd like to tell the listener? And even if it's poker power, then we'll talk more about that too.
Yes, it's not poker related.
Cool.
I think this is going to go over horribly with your audience, but what I am extremely passionate about is astrology. I've been working very diligently on my astrology YouTube channel. I do chart readings for people and I analyze celebrity astrology. And I say like, hey, what happened with that relationship? Were they compatible? Were they not? Why are they still married? So I am so passionate about astrology. And I feel like it's another way of getting into people's heads. And
Botfeld, how did we go from like this pure analytic poker space to astrology?
Virgo moon. Okay. Pisces is like creative and Virgo's analytical. So I got both. But basically, I think it's both that real interest in just kind of seeing what drives people, what makes people tick. And and so that's like my number one passion right now. Astrology.
And if there are some aspiring astrologists in the audience right now, the final question, where can the Chasing Poker Greatness learn more about you on the World Wide Web?
On the World Wide Web? I'm not very updated with anything, to be honest, but my Instagram's good because I don't usually private it. My Twitter, I go back and forth. My Instagram's Amanda Botfeld, Botfeld. And sometimes on Twitter,
Where's the YouTube? Where's the YouTube channel?
Oh, but that's not related to poker.
Who cares? We can tell them anyway.
My YouTube channel is Celeb Astrology. Mostly it's like clips of celebrities. Every once in a while I'm on there myself and do a cameo if you want to learn about the stars. You said that this podcast is 97% men.
Something like that.
Something like that. All right, mine's 99% women. So
So you're speaking to like the 3% in the audience right now.
Speaking to the 3%, and I have some videos that are 100%. But it's just something that I am so incredibly passionate about. And, I posted a picture on my Facebook of an ephemeris, which is what you use to like look at the planetary movements. And one of my poker friends commented, like, I thought pre-flop charts were hard. And I actually I have it like, and you can see how technical it gets. Like, this is what right here, this is what an ephemeris looks like. I know your podcast viewers can't read it, but they can Google it. And these are all the degrees of the planet, right? It's challenging. It's quite technical.
Yeah, so, there's a lot of information there that puts Tom Chambers' classic $2,000 PLO book to shame. That was just
thank you. It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot, and it's just another thing that, a whole nother world that's just very immersive, gets your mind going, gets you thinking about something. And I've just been so happy to be head first.
Awesome. And I think that for the listener, maybe you're not into astrology, but it is very important that you chase the things that excite you, that you can immerse yourself into, that, get you up and going day after day, because like, this is the point of life. If we're not doing this as often as we can, then what's the point, right?
Right. And it's nice to have something that's so different than poker, because at first, for a while, it felt like everything was just all poker.
I would never know what that feeling is like.
You would never know that.
Every day from like wake up to night is just all poker all the time. Except for there was a stretch where I took edibles every night for about 6 months and was like, no, nobody messaged me.
You should be into astrology, right? Then you should. Yeah. But it has you ask higher questions. Like, I can say, hey, your chart's, predisposition to leadership. Well, what does leadership mean? That's really going to depend on person experience and so many things. It'll say, hey, there's, different kinds of intelligence. And so stuff like that, you're just kind of using, whereas poker is, so technical. Astrology is very technical too, but it's also very big picture.
Yeah. Well, best of luck to your astrology path and poker power, and your class at UC Santa Monica, all the things. It seems and you're getting married next week too. So
yeah,
quite the number of things since episode number 1, and excited to have you back in the future, and hope all is well. We'll catch up and see how all the things are going.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for listening. And it's been a great time.
My pleasure, Amanda. Take care. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. All right, cheers.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.